Imagine settling into your college dorm, excited for a new chapter, only to find a letter tucked under your door. A letter with your name on it, written in shaky handwriting. Now imagine it warns you about something in your building, something you're not supposed to see. What would you do if you realized it was already too late? Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're diving into 3 disturbing college horror stories that will make you think twice about dorm life and late-night study sessions. From shadowy figures in the library to sinister secrets in student housing, these chilling tales will have you reconsidering your campus safety. Let's dive in. Story 1, The Roommate I Never Had by Claire Matheson. My name is Claire Matheson, and I'm still not sure whether I ever really had a roommate, or if what I thought was my college experience was simply a waking nightmare. It started at the beginning of my freshman year, when I moved into a shared dorm room in the old brick building on campus. I was excited to meet my roommate, and like most new students, I had visions of late-night talks, shared secrets, and bonding over the stress of assignments. What I didn't expect was the feeling of loneliness that hit me the second I entered that room. The dorm had this old, musty smell that I couldn't shake, but I didn't think much of it. I was eager to start my college life. My roommate, Jessica, had already moved in, or so I thought. I was told that she was an upperclassman, which made me feel a bit more secure. She'd be experienced, and I could ask her all kinds of questions about campus life. But when I walked in, I didn't see anyone at first. The bed closest to the window was neatly made, with a small pile of books stacked on the nightstand. On the other side of the room, the bed was completely untouched, a thin layer of dust covering the desk and the chair. "Hello," I called out, stepping in further. No answer. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe Jessica was out at the time. The room wasn't big, but it had that feeling of a space you were meant to share, yet something felt off about it. As I unpacked, I heard footsteps from the hallway. When I turned around, I saw her, Jessica, or at least who I assumed was Jessica, enter the room. She was tall with dark hair and a serious, quiet demeanor. She was wearing a loose sweater, and her eyes, although striking, had a tired, distant quality to them. "Hey," I greeted her, smiling. "I'm Claire. You must be Jessica." She nodded slowly but didn't offer much of a smile. She set down a duffel bag near her bed, then sat on it, staring at the floor. I tried to make small talk. "Are you a senior? I heard you're an upperclassman." She barely looked up. "Yeah." We both sat in silence for a few minutes. I tried to break the awkwardness, but there was something about her, something almost unapproachable. I felt a bit disappointed, but figured I'd give her some time to warm up. After all, she had to be tired from moving in. The first few days weren't much better. Jessica kept to herself, rarely speaking, and when she did, it was brief, often monosyllabic. I was left to adjust to college life on my own, but I didn't mind too much. I had plenty of other people to meet. The rest of the dorm was fairly quiet as well, with most students spending their time in the common areas or in class. Then things started getting strange. The first oddity was the sound of whispers at night. Around 2 a.m. every night, I'd hear a low murmur coming from Jessica's side of the room. At first, I thought she might be on the phone, but when I'd glance over, she'd be lying in bed, facing the wall, completely still. The whispers continued each night, soft, unintelligible words that seemed to fill the room, making it impossible to sleep. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, but when I asked her about it one morning, she looked at me blankly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, her voice low. "I don't talk in my sleep." I let it go, but I couldn't ignore the increasing feeling of unease. A few days later, I came back from class to find the room completely rearranged. My things, my books, clothes, even my bedspread, had been moved around. Not just a little bit, but completely changed. I stared at the room in confusion. The dresser was on the opposite wall, and my personal items were stacked neatly on top of Jessica's bed. Jessica herself was nowhere to be seen. I had no memory of moving anything. Did I sleepwalk? Was I the one who'd done this while sleep deprived? I began doubting my own sanity. Later that night, I confronted her. "Jessica, did you move my stuff?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't even look up from her textbook. "What are you talking about?" she said flatly. "I didn't touch anything." I was about to argue, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Jessica's side of the room, the bed, the desk, the personal items, was all untouched. Everything was as it had been when I first arrived. The next night I came back to find my bed completely unmade, even though I had made it before leaving that morning. I froze. It was as if someone else had been in the room, someone I couldn't see. The whispers grew louder too. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. The feeling of being watched, of something being out of place, was driving me to the edge. I left the room one morning and went to the building's front desk to ask about a room transfer. The receptionist, a woman named Carla, gave me a strange look. "There's no one by the name of Jessica in that room," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Your roommate was supposed to be named Lily Brooks." I felt my heart skip a beat. I didn't know what was going on, but this couldn't be real. Lily Brooks? The name didn't sound familiar, but when I asked Carla to show me the records, she revealed that Jessica, whoever she was, had never been registered as a student in the building. "I've seen her around," Carla said slowly, "but she's never been on the list." My hands shook as I left the desk and went back to the room. I opened the door, half expecting to find everything normal, but instead I saw only a mess, my things scattered around, and Jessica's bed completely untouched, just like before. But she was gone. I never saw Jessica, or whatever she was, again. And when I left for winter break, I was transferred to a new room, without ever having received a satisfactory explanation. To this day, I still don't know who or what I lived with for those weeks. I don't know if I imagined it or if something else was happening in that room, but I'll never forget the whisper or the feeling of being watched by someone or something that wasn't really there. Story 2, The Haunting of the East Wing Library by Marcus Drayton. My name is Marcus Drayton, and this story still haunts me, even though it happened years ago. You see, I'm one of those students who always spent long hours in the library, studying late into the night. The East Wing Library at my college, with its endless rows of books and quiet atmosphere, was the perfect place to escape the distractions of dorm life. The library was old, so old that it had a certain smell to it. You know the kind, a mix of dust, leather, and the musty pages of books that had seen far better days. It wasn't the most modern of buildings, but it had character. That's what I always told myself anyway. But there was something about the East Wing that made me uneasy, especially at night. It was the least frequented part of the library, and for good reason. Most students preferred the newer, more brightly lit sections. But the East Wing had this eerie, dim lighting that seemed to cast long shadows on the bookshelves. And no matter how many times I tried to ignore it, I always felt like I wasn't alone. It started on a Wednesday evening in October. I was preparing for finals, and I'd been holed up in the East Wing for hours. There were only a few students left, and none of them were in my section. The silence was almost oppressive, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. And the only sound was the quiet flipping of pages and the occasional cough. Around midnight, the power flickered briefly, and for a moment, the entire section was plunged into darkness. I froze. It wasn't unusual for the lights to go out briefly. Old buildings often had electrical issues, but something felt different about this time. The room seemed heavier, like the air itself had thickened. I pulled out my phone to use its flashlight, and just as the light from my screen illuminated the pages of my textbook, I heard it, a soft whisper. It wasn't coming from the other students. It was coming from behind me. At first, I thought it was a trick of the mind, the result of too much caffeine and too little sleep. But the whispering continued. It wasn't in any language I recognized, just soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to get closer with every passing second. My heart started to race. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. But when I turned around, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood at the end of one of the aisles, just outside the reach of my flashlight's beam. It was tall, its shape obscured by the shadows. At first, I thought it might be another student, but as I stared, I realized that the figure was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were not fully part of this world. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, the figure was gone. I sat there, frozen, unable to move. My mind was telling me to get up, to leave, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the spot where the figure had been. The whispering had stopped, but an icy coldness filled the room, as if something had moved into the space with me. It felt like hours before the power came back on and the lights flickered to life. I breathed a sigh of relief, the normal brightness of the room reassuring me that I was safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The library felt different, darker somehow. I gathered my things quickly and decided to leave. As I passed through the aisles, I noticed that the books were wrong. The titles on the spines were blurred, as if they weren't supposed to be there. I tried to focus on them, but the more I looked, the more distorted the words became. I reached the door, but just as I was about to exit, I heard a voice, clearer this time. "Don't leave." I spun around, but there was no one there. The whisper had come from the direction of the East Wing's farthest row of bookshelves, the one closest to the locked door that led to a restricted area. I had never been inside that area and didn't know what was behind it, but something about it made my skin crawl. I didn't wait to find out. I ran out of the library as quickly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. The next day I told a few friends about what had happened, but none of them took me seriously. They laughed it off as stress, as though I had imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. That evening I went back to the East Wing, determined to get to the bottom of it. When I entered, the room was silent, too silent. The air was heavy, thick with a tension I couldn't explain. I walked through the aisles, my footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness. When I reached the restricted door, I hesitated. There was something about it that drew me in, something that I couldn't quite resist. The door was old and rusty, its edges worn with time, and there was a small plaque on the side that read, "No entry without permission." Ignoring the warning, I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Beyond it was a narrow staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. I stepped inside, feeling the temperature drop as I descended. The air smelled damp, like earth in decay. As I reached the bottom, the faint sound of the whispering returned, but this time, it was clearer. I could make out the words now. "Get out!" I turned and ran, my feet stumbling on the stairs. When I finally made it back to the main floor of the library, I knew without a doubt that I had crossed a line, that I had found something I wasn't supposed to see. I never returned to the East Wing Library after that night. I finished my finals in other parts of the campus, avoiding that building at all costs. And to this day, I still wonder about the voices I heard and the things I saw, or didn't see, in that dark, haunted place. Story 3. The Room with the Locked Door by Evelyn Monroe. My name is Evelyn Monroe, and this story has haunted me ever since I first stepped foot on campus. It's the kind of tale that makes your stomach turn. A story you wish you could forget but can't, because the memory is so vivid, so chilling. It all started during my sophomore year. I was living in a dorm building that was considered one of the oldest on campus. It wasn't exactly a luxurious space. Worn carpet, outdated furniture, and creaky floorboards. But it had character. At least that's what I convinced myself when I moved in. There was one room in particular that no one ever talked about. The room at the very end of the hall, just beyond the last set of student rooms. It was always locked, and no one ever seemed to know what was inside. The hallways of the dorm were narrow, and the building's age gave it a certain musty smell that lingered in the air. But this room, room 309, always stood out to me. It was the only door in the entire dorm that was sealed shut, with a thick metal lock on it. At first, I didn't give it much thought. Like most students, I had other things to focus on. Classes, friends, and the usual college drama. But as the semester wore on, I started to notice something strange. The door wasn't just locked, it was almost alive. I'm not sure how to explain it, but every time I walked past it, I felt this strange pull, a force that seemed to beckon me. The door always felt colder than the rest of the hallway, like it was keeping something trapped inside, something that shouldn't be there. One night, while heading back to my room after a late-night study session, I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint light coming from beneath the door of room 309. It was a soft glow, like a candle flickering in the dark. I stopped, my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. I checked the hallway. It was empty. I was about to walk away, thinking it was probably just a trick of my tired eyes. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just the need to know. But I found myself reaching for the door handle. To my surprise, it turned easily in my hand. The door opened just a crack, and I could feel the chill air coming from the other side. The glow was brighter now, spilling out from the narrow gap. My breath came in shallow gasps, but I couldn't stop myself from peeking inside. The room was small and cramped, like a forgotten storage closet. But it was what was on the floor that made my stomach drop. At first, I couldn't quite make it out, but as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized it was a figure, slumped, motionless, in the corner of the room. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. The figure wasn't moving, but I knew it wasn't a person. It couldn't be. I took a step back, but then something strange happened. The door slammed shut on its own, as if something was trying to keep me out. The sound echoed through the hallway and I jumped, my pulse racing. I stood there for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was reeling with confusion. Had I imagined it? What had I seen? The next day, I spoke to a few of the other students who lived in the building, hoping to get some answers. I asked around about room 309, but no one seemed to know much about it. Some students said it had been locked for years. Others claimed it was a storage space that was never used, but none of them seemed to know who had access to it or why it was kept locked. As I dug deeper, I started to hear rumors. One of the maintenance staff, a quiet, older man named Mr. Parker, was the only person who would talk to me. He was always around when something needed fixing in the dorm, and I found him one afternoon working near the hall where room 309 was located. Mr. Parker, I asked, my voice trembling slightly, do you know what's inside that room? The one at the end of the hall? He paused, his expression hardening. He glanced at the door as if to make sure no one else was listening, then lowered his voice to a whisper. It's better that you stay away from that room, girl, he said, his eyes wide with an unreadable expression. Some things are better left forgotten. He refused to say any more, and that was the last time I ever spoke to him. But that wasn't the last time I thought about room 309. Over the next few weeks, I found myself obsessed with the room. I'd pass it on my way to the bathroom, to the laundry room, to the kitchen, and every time I'd feel the same pull, the same strange coldness coming from behind that locked door. One night, unable to shake the curiosity any longer, I decided to do something reckless. I was going to break into room 309. I found a small screwdriver in the common room and used it to pry the lock open. It was surprisingly easy to break in, like the door had been waiting for me. The room was exactly as I remembered it. The same faint light, the same eerie stillness. But this time, I could see more clearly. The room was covered in dust, the floor littered with papers and old furniture. The figure I had seen before was gone, but there was something else, something much worse. The walls were covered in drawings, strange, cryptic symbols, like something you'd see in a horror movie. But they weren't random. They were arranged in a pattern, a disturbing, twisted design. I couldn't understand them, but it felt like they were staring at me, like they were alive. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, I heard something behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. The door had slammed shut behind me, and I was trapped in the darkness. I struggled to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I was stuck in that room, alone, with the eerie feeling that something was watching me from the shadows. The whispering started again, but this time it was louder, more distinct. Get out! I managed to break free from the room and ran down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I was safely in my own room. I moved out of that dorm a week later, and I've never been back. I still don't know what was in room 309 or why it was locked, but I know that whatever it wasn't meant to be disturbed. I wish I had listened to the warnings, but now I'm left with the chilling knowledge that some doors should never be opened. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these true stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.